The stars themselves seemed to tremble when the Vorthak moved through space. Their ships were not built from metal and circuits like those of other species. They were grown, cultivated from living bone and sinew that pulsed with dark energy. The hulls breathed slowly, expanding and contracting like massive lungs. Strange veins ran across their surfaces, glowing with a sickly yellow light that made other species feel sick just looking at it. Captain Jacques Moore stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Render. His 12-foot frame cast long shadows across the organic walls. His forearms moved with fluid grace, each ending in razor-sharp claws that could cut through steel. His head was elongated, crowned with spikes that jutted from his skull like a terrible crown, but it was his eyes that truly inspired fear. Hundreds of faceted lenses that seemed to look into the very soul of any creature that dared meet his gaze. The Vorthak had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. Not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through something far more powerful, pure primal terror. Every species they encountered would take one look at them and feel an ancient fear rise from deep within their minds. It was the same fear that small animals felt when facing a predator. The fear of being hunted, the fear of being eaten alive. Jacques Moore remembered his first conquest. The Ziloni had been a proud warrior race, known for their courage in battle. But when the Vorthak ships appeared in their skies, broadcasting images of themselves, the entire planet had surrendered within hours. The Ziloni warriors threw down their weapons and begged for mercy. They spoke of nightmares, of childhood fears made real. This was how the Vorthak Empire had grown so vast. They did not need to fire a single shot in most cases. They simply appeared, and entire civilizations would collapse in terror. Planets would surrender before the first landing craft touched ground. Space fleets would turn and flee at maximum speed, often destroying themselves in their panic to escape. The Empire now stretched across 47 star systems. Hundreds of species served the Vorthak, not out of loyalty or respect, but out of pure fear. They paid tribute in resources, food, and technology. They built monuments to their Vorthak masters. They told stories to their children about the terrible beings from the stars who would come for them if they were not obedient. Sub-Commander Kriegsvel approached the captain's position, moving with the silent grace that all Vorthak possessed. Her smaller frame was no less terrifying than her captain's. Acidic saliva dripped from her mandibles, leaving small burn marks on the living floor. "The scouts have returned from the outer rim," she reported. Her voice was like grinding metal, a sound that made most species want to run screaming. "They have found something interesting." Jacques Moore turned his attention to her, his hundreds of eyes focusing like a living camera. "Tell me, a new species. They call themselves humans. They have colonized several worlds in what they call the Orion Arm. The scouts observed them but did not make contact. This was standard procedure. The Vorthak always studied their prey before revealing themselves. It was important to understand how each species would react to their presence. Some would fight briefly before surrendering. Others would simply collapse immediately. A few tried to bargain or negotiate, not understanding that the Vorthak had no interest in deals or treaties. "How many worlds?" Jacques Moore asked. 17 colonies, perhaps 50 billion individuals total. They appear to be spreading rapidly through their local region. Jacques Moore felt satisfaction ripple through his being. A large population meant more servants, more tribute, more resources for the Empire. The humans would join the long list of species that served the Vorthak out of terror. Have they developed faster than light travel? Yes, but their technology is primitive. Chemical rockets, basic fusion drives, nothing that could threaten our bioships. What about their military capabilities? Kriegsvel made a sound that might have been laughter, if laughter could dissolve metal. They fight among themselves constantly. Their history is filled with wars, but they use crude weapons, projectile firearms, explosive devices, metal aircraft. They are barely beyond the industrial age. Jacques Moore nodded slowly. This sounded like many species the Vorthak had encountered. Young civilizations often went through a violent phase before reaching maturity. Once they encountered the Vorthak, such violence usually ended quickly. Fear had a way of making species very peaceful and cooperative. "There is one interesting detail," Kriegsvel continued. The scouts noted that humans seem to react differently to visual stimuli than other species. They create entertainment based on fear. Stories, moving pictures, interactive experiences that are designed to frighten them. This puzzled Jacques Moore. Most species avoided anything that caused fear. They had good reason to do so. Fear was a warning system. telling creatures when they were in danger. Why would any intelligent being seek out that feeling for pleasure? Perhaps it is how they train their young for danger, he suggested. Some primitive species use fear-based learning. Perhaps, Crixwell agreed. But the scouts observed that adults participate in these fear entertainments as well. They even pay resources to experience them. Jacques Moore dismissed this with a wave of one clawed hand. Whatever strange customs these humans had would not matter once they saw the Vorthak. No species had ever failed to feel the proper terror when faced with their true form. It was a universal constant, as reliable as gravity or the speed of light. Prepare the subjugation fleet, he ordered. We will begin with their largest colony. Once it falls, the others will surrender quickly. How many ships should we bring? Jacques Moore considered this. Most species required only a small show of force. 1 or 2 ships were usually enough to convince an entire world to surrender. But he was feeling generous today. These humans had built an impressive little empire for such a young species. They deserved a proper demonstration of Vorthak power. 6 ships, the full terror squadron. We will make this memorable. Crixwell bowed low, her spikes scraping against the organic ceiling. It will be done. Should we prepare the fear broadcasts? The fear broadcasts were recordings of Vorthak warriors in their full terrifying glory. When played on enemy communication systems, they had never failed to break the will of any species. The recordings showed Vorthak feeding, fighting, and demonstrating their terrible power. Most beings could not watch more than a few seconds without collapsing in terror. Yes, prepare the full psychological warfare package. We will give these humans nightmares they will never forget. As his officers moved to carry out his orders, Jacques Moore gazed out at the stars through the living windows of his ship. Soon another species would bow before the might of the Vorthak Empire. Another world would learn what it meant to face true fear. He had no way of knowing that he was about to encounter something the Vorthak had never faced before. A species that had spent thousands of years learning to master their own fears. A species that had turned terror into entertainment, horror into art, and nightmare into inspiration. The Vorthak were about to learn that there was a difference between inspiring fear and truly understanding it. They were about to meet the only species in the galaxy that had faced their own demons and learned to laugh. The mining colony of New Terra was having an ordinary day when the aliens arrived. Dr. Sarah Chen was in the middle of explaining xenobiology to a group of colonist children when the first Vorthak ship appeared in the sky. The massive breathing vessel descended through the atmosphere like a living nightmare, its bone-white hull pulsing with veins of sickly light. "Look," shouted Tommy, one of the 8-year-olds, pointing excitedly at the window. "It's just like the ships in Alien Hunter 9. Dr. Chen looked up and saw the impossible sight. A genuine alien spacecraft, clearly of non-human origin, was settling into the valley near their settlement. Her heart raced, but not with fear. This was the moment every xenobiologist dreamed of. First contact with an alien species. "Children, please remain calm," she said, though she could barely contain her own excitement. "This is a historic moment. We're about to meet our first alien visitors." The ship landed with a wet, organic sound that made the ground tremble. Slowly, a section of its hull dilated like a massive iris, revealing a dark opening. The colonists gathered in the town square, many holding cameras and recording devices. Instead of running or hiding, they waited with curiosity and anticipation. The first Vorthak to emerge was a scout named Vextar. He had been chosen for this mission because his appearance was particularly terrifying, even by Vorthak standards. His elongated skull was covered in spikes that dripped with acid. His 4 arms ended in claws sharp enough to slice through titanium. His hundreds of eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence. Vextar strode into the town square expecting to see the usual reaction: screaming, running, complete panic. Instead, he found himself surrounded by humans who were staring at him with what appeared to be fascination. "Incredible," whispered Dr. Chen, pulling out a scanner. "Look at that exoskeleton structure. The way those limbs articulate. And those eyes. They must have incredibly complex vision." A young artist named Marcus was already sketching Vextar in his notebook. "The symmetry is amazing," he muttered. "It's like something from a Lovecraft story, but real." Vextar stopped in confusion. These humans were not behaving correctly. They should be cowering in terror, begging for mercy. Instead, they seemed interested. Some were even approaching him. "Excuse me," said Dr. Chen, walking up to within a few feet of the deadly alien. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, xenobiologist. We're so excited to meet you. Are you from this galaxy? What's your homeworld like? Vextar tried to loom over her menacingly, spreading his forearms wide and revealing the acid-dripping mandibles around his mouth. He made the horrible grinding sound that served as the Vorthak language. Oh, you don't speak standard, Dr. Chen said, not backing away. That's okay. We have translation software. This is so exciting. Behind her, the other colonists were reacting in ways that made Vextar's mind reel. An elderly man was comparing the alien to creatures from what he called monster movies. A teenager was asking if she could take a selfie with him. Several children were drawing pictures of him for what they called art class. "Mom, can we keep him?" asked a small girl with pigtails. Her mother laughed. "I don't think the nice alien wants to be a pet, sweetie." Vextar activated his fear pheromones, chemical signals that were designed to trigger panic in any mammalian nervous system. The humans sniffed the air curiously. "Smells like sulfur," noted the town chemist. "Fascinating. It must be some kind of chemical communication." This was impossible. Every species in the galaxy reacted to Vorthak pheromones with immediate terror. It was a biological constant, yet these humans seemed completely unaffected. Vextar tried a different approach. He activated his ship's external speakers and played one of the fear broadcasts, a recording of Vorthak warriors tearing apart their enemies, accompanied by the screams of their victims. The sound echoed across the settlement. The humans listened with interest. "Oh, that's clever," said Dr. Chen. "Psychological warfare, using fear as a weapon. We've studied that extensively in human history. Sounds like a death metal concert," laughed one of the teenagers. "The audio quality is excellent," noted the settlement's communications officer. "What kind of technology are they using?" Vextar was beginning to feel something he had never experienced before: doubt. These humans were not reacting like any species should react to the Vorthak. They showed no fear, no panic, no submission. If anything, they seemed pleased to see him. A young boy approached with a drawing tablet. "I drew you," he announced proudly, showing a colorful picture of Vextar with the words, "My new alien friend," written in crayon across the top. Vextar stared at the image in bewilderment. In 3,000 years of conquest, no one had ever called a Vorthak a friend. Dr. Chen was now examining his ship with obvious scientific interest. "The biomechanical integration is incredible," she was saying to her colleagues. "It's like they've merged organic and technological systems. I wonder if we could get a tissue sample for analysis." "I don't think that would be polite," replied the settlement's mayor, who had arrived to greet their visitors. "Though I'm sure our new friends would be happy to share information about their fascinating culture." Vextar tried one last desperate measure. He opened his mandibles wide, revealing rows of acid-coated teeth, and let out the hunting shriek that had terrorized 1,000 worlds. The sound was designed to trigger the deepest, most primal fears of any sentient being. The humans applauded. "Magnificent," exclaimed Dr. Chen. "What a complex vocal range." "That would be perfect for our Halloween festival," said the mayor. "You should definitely come in October." By now, more Vorthak were emerging from the ship, all of them finding themselves surrounded by friendly, curious humans. Children were offering them drawings. Adults were asking questions about their technology, their culture, their biology. Someone had even started preparing a welcome feast. Vextar activated his emergency communicator and contacted the flagship in orbit. "Command, we have a problem," he reported. "Explain," came Jacques Moore's voice, distorted by the bioacoustic systems. "The humans, they are not afraid." There was a long pause. "That is impossible. All species fear the Vorthak. It is a universal constant. They want to study us. They are asking for tissue samples. One of their young drew a picture of me and called me her friend." Another pause, longer this time. "You must be mistaken. Perhaps they are in shock. Fear sometimes causes strange behaviors." "No, sir. They appeared genuinely pleased to meet us. They are planning some kind of celebration meal." Jacques Moore's voice became sharp. "Withdraw immediately. We will reassess the situation." As the Vorthak retreated to their ship, the humans waved goodbye and shouted friendly farewells. Dr. Chen called out that they hoped to see them again soon. The children held up their drawings. As their ship lifted off, Vextar looked down at the settlement below. The humans had already returned to their daily activities, apparently untroubled by their encounter with the galaxy's most feared species. For the first time in his life, Vextar felt what humans might call unease. These beings were unlike anything the Vorthak had ever encountered. They showed no fear of the unknown. They turned first contact into a social event. They wanted to learn about the very beings who had come to conquer them. Back on the flagship, Jacques stared at the reports in confusion. In 3,000 years of empire building, nothing like this had ever happened. Species either surrendered immediately or fought briefly before surrendering. They did not invite their conquerors to dinner. Perhaps they are too primitive to understand the threat we represent, suggested Crixvel. Or perhaps, Jacques said slowly, they are more dangerous than they appear. Neither of them could have imagined how right he was. The humans of New Terra were already uploading their encounter to the Galactic Communication Network, sharing videos and images of their amazing new alien visitors. Within hours, the footage would reach every human colony, but instead of fear, the reaction would be excitement. Scientists would analyze the aliens' biology. Artists would create works inspired by their appearance. Children would add them to their games and stories. The Vorthak had made first contact with the only species in the galaxy that collected nightmares for entertainment. Admiral Rebecca Santos stood in the war room of Earth Defense Command, studying the holographic displays that showed Vorthak fleet movements across human space. 3 weeks had passed since first contact at New Terra, and the aliens had not responded well to humanity's friendly reception. Status report, she ordered. Colonel Zhang stepped forward with his datapad. 18 Vorthak ships have entered our territory. They're moving in formation toward our major population centers. We've received what appears to be a surrender demand, though their translation protocols are still primitive. What exactly are they demanding? Immediate submission to something called the Vorthak Empire. Complete cessation of all military activities. Tribute payments in the form of food, raw materials, and manufactured goods. Zhang paused. They also want us to hand over 10% of our population as servants. Admiral Santos raised an eyebrow. Servants? The translation is unclear, but our xenolinguistics team thinks it might mean slaves. Around the room, the faces of Earth's military leaders showed a range of emotions. Anger, determination, and something that might have been amusement. Have we received any actual threats? Asked General Morrison, the head of Marine Operations. They've been broadcasting what they call fear demonstrations, Zhang replied. Recordings of their warriors in combat, images of destroyed cities, that sort of thing. Our psychological warfare specialists have analyzed them, and Dr. Patricia Williams, the Chief Psychological Operations Officer, stepped forward. The recordings are designed to trigger primal fear responses. They show the aliens engaging in what appears to be ritualistic violence, consumption of other species, and destruction of civilian targets. It's quite sophisticated from a psychological perspective. How are our people responding to these broadcasts? Dr. Williams looked uncomfortable. Sir, they're treating them like entertainment. The recordings have gone viral on the civilian networks. People are sharing them, remixing them into music videos and creating parody versions. One teenager from Mars Colony turned the alien war cry into a dance beat. Admiral Santos felt a headache coming on. Are our people taking this threat seriously at all? Some are, Dr. Williams replied. But many seem to view the aliens as interesting rather than threatening. The xenobiology community is particularly excited. Dr. Chen's initial contact report has been downloaded over 1 billion times. The Admiral turned to her intelligence chief. What do we know about these Vorthak? Commander Torres activated a new holographic display. We've been analyzing their ships and technology. The vessels appear to be biomechanical hybrids, living tissue integrated with technological systems, highly advanced but in ways we didn't expect. Explain. Their ships are essentially giant organisms. They heal damage naturally. They don't require traditional fuel sources, and they can reproduce. But their computer systems are relatively primitive. They seem to rely heavily on biological processing rather than digital computation. What about their military capabilities? Unknown. We haven't seen them fire any weapons yet. Their entire strategy seems based on psychological warfare. Intelligence suggests they've conquered dozens of species through fear alone. Admiral Santos nodded slowly. But fear doesn't work on us. No, sir. If anything, we seem to find them fascinating rather than frightening. Then we need to show them what human warfare actually looks like. The Admiral activated the main communication system, linking her to defense commands across human space. This is Admiral Santos to all fleet commanders. We are implementing Defense Protocol 7. Assume hostile intent from all Vorthak vessels. What are our rules of engagement? Asked Admiral Kim from the Centauri Defense Fleet. Standard protocols. Attempt communication first, but be prepared for military action. And I want our Psychological Warfare Division to prepare some materials of our own. Dr. Williams looked puzzled. What kind of materials? Admiral Santos smiled grimly. The Vorthak seem to think they can frighten us with images of violence and destruction. I think it's time we showed them what humans consider entertaining. 2 hours later, the first human response was broadcast across all communication channels in Vorthak space. It wasn't a surrender or a plea for negotiation. It was a compilation video. The transmission began with scenes from human history. Ancient warriors charging into battle despite impossible odds. Medieval knights facing dragons in their legends. Soldiers storming beaches under heavy fire. Civilians rebuilding cities after devastating wars. Then it moved to human entertainment. Clips from horror movies that made Vorthak fear broadcasts look like children's cartoons. Battle scenes from action films where heroes faced overwhelming odds and emerged victorious. Videos of extreme sports where humans deliberately put themselves in danger for fun. The narration was provided by Dr. Chen, speaking in broken but improving Vorthak. Greetings, friends from the stars. We humans are excited to learn about your culture of fear. We too appreciate good horror entertainment. Here are some examples of what we find frightening and exciting. The compilation showed humans diving from cliffs, racing cars at deadly speeds, climbing mountains in blizzards, and exploring deep caves. It showed them laughing during horror movies, cheering at violent sports, and voluntarily entering haunted houses designed to terrify them. We notice you enjoy psychological warfare. Dr. Chen continued. This is very interesting to us. We have spent thousands of years perfecting our own techniques. The video then shifted to scenes from human psychological operations, propaganda films from various wars, interrogation techniques, psychological manipulation tactics that had been developed over centuries of conflict. We have studied fear extensively, the narration explained, not because we are afraid, but because we find it useful. The final section of the transmission was the most unsettling. It showed humans calmly discussing violence as an academic subject, military historians explaining battle tactics, psychologists analyzing the effects of trauma, scientists studying the neurological basis of fear. We hope we can be friends, Dr. Chen concluded. But if you prefer to communicate through fear and violence, we are prepared for that conversation as well. The response from the Vorthak was immediate. Every ship in their fleet stopped moving. On the bone render, Captain Jacques Moore stared at the communication display in bewilderment. His psychological warfare specialists were frantically analyzing the human transmission. What is your assessment? He demanded. Sub-Commander Crevell looked pale, which was disturbing on a being whose natural color was already corpse white. Sir, this is unlike anything we have encountered. The humans appear to have studied fear as a scientific discipline. Explain. Their entertainment shows violence and terror that exceeds our own fear broadcasts. Their historical records show they have been fighting wars for thousands of years without interruption, and their scientific community appears to understand psychological manipulation at a level that rivals our own specialists. Jacques Moore felt something cold settle in his stomach. Are you saying they are not afraid because they are too primitive to understand danger? No, sir. I am saying they are not afraid because they have seen worse things than us, in their own history, in their entertainment, in their imagination. Another officer approached with additional reports. Sir, we are receiving more transmissions from human space. Individual colonies are sending their own responses. Show me. The display filled with dozens of smaller communications. Each human settlement had apparently decided to send their own message to the Vorthak. Some were scientific inquiries about alien biology. Others were invitations to cultural exchanges. A few were complaints that the Vorthak fear broadcasts were interrupting regular entertainment programs. But it was the messages from human military units that truly disturbed Jacques Moore. Professional soldiers calmly analyzing Vorthak tactics and suggesting improvements. Veterans sharing stories of battles that made Vorthak conquests look like minor skirmishes. Military strategists offering critiques of alien psychological warfare techniques. They are treating us like students, Crixvel whispered. Jacques Moore realized with growing alarm that she was right. The humans weren't responding to the Vorthak as conquerors or even as equals. They were responding to them as interesting but inexperienced newcomers who might benefit from some guidance. "Sir," reported the communications officer, "we are receiving a priority transmission from the Human Military Command." On screen, Admiral Santos appeared in the holographic display, her expression calm and professional. "This is Admiral Rebecca Santos of Earth Defense Command. We have reviewed your communications and your territorial claims. We are prepared to discuss terms for coexistence, but we cannot accept your current demands." She paused, consulting notes. "We are particularly concerned about your request for human servants. Slavery has been illegal in human space for over 2 centuries. We would be happy to discuss cultural exchange programs, scientific cooperation, and trade agreements instead." Jacques Moore tried to project his most intimidating presence. "You will surrender immediately or face the consequences." Admiral Santos looked genuinely puzzled. "What consequences? Your ships haven't fired any weapons. Your psychological warfare broadcasts are being treated as entertainment by our civilian population. And frankly, your demands sound like something from a historical drama about primitive conquest. We are the Vorthak Empire. We have conquered. The first battle began at the Kepler 442 system, where humanity had established a major industrial colony. Captain Jacques Moore led his fleet of 6 Vorthak bioships against what appeared to be a small human defense force, 3 cruisers and a handful of fighters. "Begin the assault," Jacques Moore ordered. "Show them the true power of the Vorthak." The Bone Render opened fire with its primary weapon, a stream of acidic bioplasma that could melt through any known armor. The blast struck the lead human cruiser, the UES Defiant, and began eating through its hull. But instead of exploding or retreating, the human ship simply rerouted power and returned fire with kinetic projectiles that struck the Vorthak vessel like hammers. The bioship's living armor absorbed some damage, but the humans had clearly studied their target well. "Interesting," Admiral Santos observed from the tactical center on Luna. "They use biological weapons, but they don't seem to understand modern defensive systems." The space battle continued for 3 hours. The Vorthak ships were tough and their weapons were exotic, but they fought like creatures from an earlier era. They relied on fear and intimidation rather than tactical superiority. When their psychological warfare failed to work, they seemed genuinely confused about how to proceed. Human forces, on the other hand, fought with cold efficiency. They analyzed Vorthak weapons in real time, adapted their defenses, and began targeting the aliens' weaknesses with surgical precision. "Their bioships heal naturally," reported Commander Chen from the Defiant. "But the healing process requires energy. If we keep up sustained fire, we can overwhelm their regeneration capabilities." "Copy that. All units focus fire on individual targets. Don't let them recover." The tide of battle turned quickly. 2 Vorthak ships were disabled, their living hulls too damaged to continue fighting. A third was forced to retreat when its bioneural system suffered cascade failures from human cyber warfare attacks, but it was what happened after the battle that truly disturbed the surviving Vorthak. Instead of celebrating their victory or demanding surrender, the humans began studying the disabled alien ships. Scientific vessels arrived within hours, equipped with exotic scanners and research equipment. "We're getting incredible data on biomechanical integration," Dr. Sarah Chen reported excitedly from her research ship. "These vessels are masterpieces of biological engineering. We could learn so much from them." The disabled Vorthak crews found themselves treated not as prisoners of war, but as research subjects. Human scientists wanted to understand their biology, their technology, their psychology. They asked endless questions about Vorthak culture, their empire, their methods of conquest. "How do you integrate organic and digital systems?" Dr. Martinez asked Vextar during his interview. "The neural interface technology is fascinating." Vextar, who had expected to be tortured or executed, found himself instead participating in what humans called a debriefing session. They wanted to understand how Vorthak psychological warfare worked, not because they feared it, but because they found it academically interesting. "You use pheromone-based fear induction," noted Dr. Williams. "Very clever. We've experimented with similar techniques but never achieved this level of biological integration." You study fear?" Vextar asked, confused. "Of course. Fear is one of the primary human emotions. We've been analyzing it for centuries. Military applications, therapeutic treatments, entertainment purposes. It's a rich field of study. Meanwhile, human special forces had begun what they called psychological countermeasures. If the Vorthak wanted to fight with fear, humans were prepared to show them what genuine terror looked like. The first operation targeted a Vorthak supply convoy. Instead of attacking the ships directly, human commandos infiltrated them using advanced stealth technology. They moved through the bioships like ghosts, leaving no trace of their presence except for subtle signs that they had been there. A claw mark on a wall, a piece of human equipment left in a strategic location, messages written in the condensation on the breathing walls of the ships. "We know you're here," one message read imperfectly. Translated Vorthak script. "Your fear feeds us," read another. The psychological impact on the Vorthak crews was immediate and devastating. These aliens had never encountered an enemy that could move unseen through their own ships. They had never faced opponents who could turn their own fear-based tactics against them. Paranoia spread through the Vorthak fleet like a plague. Crews jumped at shadows. Officers accused each other of being human infiltrators. Ship commanders began demanding constant security sweeps, disrupting their own operations. "They are in our ships," Sub-Commander Crixvel reported to Jacques Moore, her voice shaking. "We find their marks everywhere, but we never see them." "That is impossible. Our bioships would detect any foreign presence. They have technology we do not understand. They move like spirits, like the old legends of the Void Hunters." Jacques Moore felt his confidence cracking. The Void Hunters were mythical creatures from ancient Vorthak folklore, invisible predators that stalked their prey through the darkness of space. He had never thought he would hear his officers comparing real enemies to childhood nightmares. But the humans were just getting started. The next phase of human psychological warfare involved broadcasting their own fear-based entertainment into Vorthak communication networks. Not the relatively mild fear demonstrations the aliens had used, but genuine human horror media. Films like Event Horizon and Alien began playing on Vorthak screens. Stories of cosmic horror that made Lovecraft look optimistic. Historical documentaries about human atrocities that were so disturbing they carried mental health warnings. "This is their entertainment?" Crixvel whispered after watching 5 minutes of a human horror film. "They create these nightmares for pleasure?" The content was specifically chosen to target Vorthak psychology. Stories about body horror that would disturb a species with biomechanical integration. Tales of cosmic insignificance that would shake beings who believed they were apex predators. Historical accounts of human warfare that demonstrated levels of calculated cruelty the Vorthak had never imagined. "According to their data files," reported the intelligence officer, "these stories are considered light entertainment by human standards. They have warning labels for mild violence and brief scary scenes." Jacques Moore stared at the reports in disbelief. What did they consider seriously frightening? The answer came 3 days later when human forces broadcast their response to continued Vorthak aggression. It wasn't a battle cry or a threat. It was a documentary. A History of Human Conflict. Volume 1 was a 12-hour academic presentation about humanity's approach to warfare. It covered everything from ancient tribal raids to modern orbital bombardments. It discussed human innovations in weapons technology, psychological warfare, and strategic thinking. But it was the casual, professorial tone that made it truly unsettling. The narrator discussed genocide and nuclear warfare with the same calm objectivity used to describe weather patterns. Human military historians analyzed the effectiveness of various atrocities, as if they were discussing engineering problems. The use of chemical weapons in the Third Terran War demonstrated the importance of environmental factors in biological warfare, the narrator explained over footage of devastated cities. Lessons learned from this conflict were incorporated into the colonial defense protocols, resulting in a 40% improvement in area denial effectiveness. The documentary made it clear that humans didn't fight wars to inspire fear or assert dominance. They fought to win using any methods necessary. They analyzed their own brutality with scientific detachment and incorporated the lessons into training programs. "Sir," Crixvel reported after watching the full documentary, "I believe we have made a serious error." Explain. "We assumed these humans were like other species, that they could be intimidated through demonstrations of superior force. But they are not like other species. They study violence the way we study biology. They have turned warfare into a science." Jacques Moore felt something he had never experienced before, genuine fear. Not the controlled intimidation the Vorthak used as a tool, but real primal terror at facing something beyond his understanding. What do you recommend? Retreat, sir. We are not equipped to fight an enemy that treats our greatest weapons as academic curiosities. But Jacques Moore's pride would not allow him to accept defeat. The Vorthak Empire had never retreated from any enemy. They were the apex predators of the galaxy. No. We will show them true terror. Prepare the death ships, Crixvel's eyes widened. Sir, the death ships are for complete planetary sterilization. Are you certain? The humans want to study fear. We will give them a lesson they will never forget. What Jacques Moore didn't know was that human intelligence had been monitoring all Vorthak communications. They knew about the death ships. They knew what the Vorthak were planning. And they were ready with a response that would teach the aliens the difference between inspiring fear and truly understanding horror. The Vorthak death ships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, like harbingers of apocalypse. These vessels were different from the biocruisers humans had already encountered. They were massive cathedral-sized organisms designed for one purpose: the complete sterilization of planetary surfaces. Captain Jacques Moore stood on the bridge of the largest death ship, the Void Devourer, watching Earth grow larger on his display screens. This blue-green world would be the first human planet to experience true Vorthak power. After its destruction, the other human colonies would surely surrender. Begin the fear broadcast, he ordered. Let them see what awaits them. The transmission that reached Earth showed the death ships in all their terrible glory. Creatures the size of cities, covered in weapon pods that could rain destruction on entire continents. The broadcast included footage of previous sterilizations. Alien worlds reduced to molten slag, their atmospheres burned away, their populations extinct. The message was simple: surrender immediately or watch your homeworld die. Admiral Santos received the broadcast in the war room deep beneath Earth's surface. Around her, the planet's military leadership watched the alien demonstration with professional interest. Impressive, commented General Morrison. Those ships must be several kilometers long. The energy requirements for those weapon systems would be enormous. The biological integration is remarkable, added Dr. Chen, who had been studying captured Vorthak technology. They've essentially created living warships. The entire vessel appears to be one massive organism. Admiral Santos turned to her intelligence chief. How long until they reach firing position? 6 hours, assuming they maintain current velocity. And our preparations? Complete. All civilian populations have been evacuated to the deep shelters. Military assets are in position, and the special package is ready for deployment. Admiral Santos nodded. The special package was humanity's response to Vorthak psychological warfare. A demonstration that would show the aliens what humans considered truly frightening. Open a channel to the Vorthak fleet. Jacques Moore's image appeared on the communication screen, his hundreds of eyes glowing with triumph. Humans, he said in heavily accented standard, you have seen our power. Surrender now and we will allow some of your species to survive as servants. That's a generous offer, Admiral Santos replied calmly. But I'm afraid we'll have to decline. Then your world will burn. Perhaps. But before that happens, we'd like to share something with you. A gift, you might say. A token of appreciation for introducing us to your fascinating culture of fear. Jacques Moore felt a chill of unease. These humans never reacted as they should. What gift? We call it the Archive. It's a comprehensive collection of human knowledge about horror, fear, and the darker aspects of existence. Since you seem so interested in these subjects, we thought you might enjoy studying our techniques. The transmission began innocuously enough. Historical footage of human conflicts similar to what the Vorthak had seen before. But then it shifted into something far more disturbing. The Archive was not random footage or entertainment media. It was a carefully curated collection of humanity's deepest, darkest knowledge, assembled by experts in psychological warfare and presented with clinical precision. It began with human history, but not the sanitized version taught in schools. This was history stripped of all moral context, presented as pure data, genocides analyzed for efficiency, torture techniques cataloged by effectiveness, weapons of mass destruction discussed as engineering achievements, the development of enhanced interrogation techniques during the Fourth Corporate War led to a 30% improvement in information extraction rates, narrated Dr. Williams in the same calm, academic tone she might use to discuss weather patterns. The Vorthak officers watched in growing horror as humans discussed their own atrocities with scientific detachment. These beings didn't just wage war, they studied it, refined it, turned it into an academic discipline. But the historical section was only the beginning. The archive then moved into theoretical horror, human imagination unleashed to create nightmares that had never existed in reality, cosmic horror that dwarfed the scale of galactic conquest, body horror that made Vorthak biotechnology look primitive, psychological horror that could break minds with mere concepts. The theoretical framework for existential dread was first established by philosopher H.P. Lovecraft. In the early 20th century, the narration continued. His work demonstrated that true terror comes not from physical threat, but from the complete insignificance of the observer in an indifferent universe. Stories and concepts flowed past the Vorthak screens, being so vast that galaxies were mere atoms to them. Realities where suffering was the fundamental force of existence. Universes where consciousness itself was a disease to be cured. Crixvel found herself backing away from her viewing screen. "Captain, perhaps we should stop watching this." But Jacquemore was transfixed. These humans had imagined horrors that exceeded anything in Vorthak experience. They had created entertainment based on the complete hopelessness of existence. They told stories where the heroes lost, where good was meaningless, where the universe itself was hostile to life. "They create these nightmares for pleasure," he whispered. The final section of the archive was the most disturbing of all. It showed human children consuming this material. Teenagers reading cosmic horror novels for fun. Children playing games based on scenarios that would traumatize adult Vorthak. University students studying the psychology of fear as if it were mathematics. Human exposure to horror entertainment begins in early childhood, the narrator explained. By adolescence, most humans have been exposed to concepts that would constitute severe psychological trauma in other species. This exposure is considered normal and healthy for psychological development. The screen filled with images of human children laughing at monster movies, creating artwork based on nightmarish themes, and casually discussing concepts that would drive lesser beings insane. "Sir," Crixvel said, her voice barely a whisper, "what kind of species raises their young on nightmares?" Jacquemore couldn't answer. He was beginning to understand that humans were not like any other species the Vorthak had encountered. They didn't fear the unknown, they embraced it. They didn't flee from horror, they studied it. They didn't break under psychological pressure, they turned it into entertainment. The transmission concluded with a message from Admiral Santos. "We hope you found our archive educational. These materials represent several thousand years of human exploration into the nature of fear, horror, and existential dread. We've been perfecting these concepts since before we left our homeworld." She paused, consulting her notes. "We noticed that your species uses fear as a weapon. This is an interesting approach, but somewhat primitive by our standards. We stopped using simple intimidation sometime around the medieval period. We find that more sophisticated psychological techniques are far more effective." The screen showed technical diagrams of human psychological warfare equipment, devices that could induce specific types of madness, techniques for breaking enemy morale without firing a shot, strategies for turning entire populations against their own leaders through carefully crafted propaganda. "We've been studying the recordings of your conquest campaigns," Admiral Santos continued. "Your techniques show promise, but they lack subtlety. You rely too heavily on visual intimidation and direct threats. A more nuanced approach might yield better results." Jacquemore felt his worldview crumbling. These humans were critiquing Vorthak's psychological warfare techniques like professors grading student papers. "Of course," Admiral Santos added. "If you prefer the direct approach, we're prepared for that as well." The display switched to show Earth's defensive fleet. Ships that looked nothing like the crude vessels the Vorthak had fought earlier. These were sleek, efficient killing machines designed by beings who had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare. "Our current fleet represents approximately 3,000 years of continuous military development," Admiral Santos explained. "We've been fighting wars since before we discovered agriculture. We've had a lot of practice." The human ships opened fire. But these weren't the kinetic weapons or energy beams the Vorthak expected. These were weapons that attacked the bioships on a cellular level, turning their living armor against them. Weapons that transmitted viruses designed to corrupt Vorthak bioneural systems. Weapons that broadcast frequencies specifically tuned to disrupt alien psychology. The death ships, those terrible instruments of planetary destruction, began to die. Their living hulls writhed in agony as human bioweapons ate them from within. Their crew members collapsed as psychic broadcasts overwhelmed their nervous systems. Their weapon systems turned inward, attacking their own vessels. "This is impossible," Jacques Moore gasped as his flagship shuddered around him. "Not impossible," came Admiral Santos's voice over the communication system. "Just more advanced than what you're used to. We've been preparing for this fight since you first appeared in our space. We studied your technology, analyzed your psychology, and developed appropriate countermeasures." Through his dying ship's sensors, Jacques Moore watched his fleet being systematically destroyed, not in the chaotic fury of battle but with cold, calculated precision.